Back again so soon, I am. Hello, and welcome back to me doing some stuff and then uploading it to the internet. I recently made a video where I watched the finale of The Haunting of Bly Manor and kind of talked about my thoughts in a very incoherent way. If you want to check that out, I will link it up here. And like, for my average video, it got pretty good responses. So I'm excited. I'm going to do a few more of those types of videos and talk about Bly Manor probably a lot more. So if you want to stick around for that content, I don't know, maybe subscribe, I don't know. It's just a thought. I'm not telling you what to do. So as you can see by the title, I'm going to be talking about Bly Manor's exploration into life and death and the relationship between the two. I want to quickly put a disclaimer and say that Mike Flanagan is clearly a genius, and there is so much packed into this show that I honestly think they could create like a college class about it. Like, that's how deep you can look into it. So with this video, I am gonna scratch the surface, but I wanted to just kind of express a few ideas that I picked up, some things that I took from what Mike was laying down. And of course there are so many different areas of this show. We could go into Danny and Jamie's relationship for like hours. We could also go into the whole idea of love in the show for hours. But alas, maybe another video. For this one, like I said, I'm going to be dealing with the whole life and death aspect of it, which is basically like a big part of the show. So let's dive in. So I want to start with Miles and Flora and their relationship with death. So their parents died when they were young, and then their first guardian after their parents also died, and Flora actually found her dead. So to say these children have trauma is an understatement. Starting out the series when you don't know the full story and you don't really know what's going on, these kids can come across as very creepy. Like they have a secret and you don't know what it is. They're aware of the ghosts in the house. Flora has the dollhouse, which shows everyone in the house, and the child moves them as everyone in the house moves. They're aware of the lady in the lake. They understand what they are surrounded by. I think this is just an expression of how familiar they are with death at such a young age. If you were to see a ghost as an adult, you'd be terrified because it's something abnormal and supernatural. But for these kids, it's a part of their everyday lives. I'm sure they don't have many memories that didn't include death in some way, but the creepiness is also emphasised by the fact that they seem so okay with being around these spirits. Almost like they're being brave. But like I said, I think this is just a normality for them, and actually in episode 7 we are shown the extent of the damage that this has done to them. When Peter gives Miles a chance to run away from it all, a form of death in a way, Miles jumps at the opportunity. Anything but to continue living with this constant death, which is what he's always ever known. And I think we can actually look further into the possessions when Rebecca and Peter possess Miles and Flora. Obviously there's the surface level meaning of they are possessing them, but if you look a little deeper, it could be to do with the fact that death is literally eating away at them. It is quite literally taking over them. So while Miles and Flora seem brave and happy on the outside, actually there is something much darker going on in there that for the first few episodes we don't even know about. We just think they're normal kids, when actually some of that time they're being possessed by ghosts. They're being eaten away at by death. Now moving on to the ghosts of the house, and when I say ghosts I mean Hannah, Peter and Rebecca. I think the insight into their lives was one of the most interesting things about this series, and one of the things that separates it from Hill House. While they are dead, they are lost in their dreams, or nightmares in some cases. They are constantly moving about and unable to control where they go or when. Not only is this very twisty, confusing manner of portraying a story very popular in Gothic romance, which of course is what the entire series is based on, but it also gives us an insight into the mind of someone who is dead, of a ghost. Hill House didn't give us the same opportunity that Bly Manor did, in a way that we didn't get to see into the mind of the ghosts. We feared them as an audience, and as the rest of the characters did. They were there for jump scares and to frighten us. But this time we got to look in deeper, and we got to feel the torture that they are also feeling. Now focusing on Hannah, so of course for most of the series, or for 5 episodes, she is unaware that she's actually dead. She's stuck dream hopping, often going back to the exact same scene. She states,
"I'm having the strangest of dreams."
Which is exactly what Olivia says in Haunting of Hill House. The biggest difference between these two characters is that one is alive and one is dead. But that raises the question, How different are the two states? So I kind of had this like massive philosophical moment in my previous video, and I will insert it here.
What is being dead? What's the boundary of being alive? Is it a heartbeat? Is it breathing? Is it a soul? And if it is a soul, then what is a soul? People who debate abortions debate, when does life begin? It's the same kind of thing. When does life end? Does it end when the heartbeat stops? Did it end when she drowned? Or did it end before then, when her soul was essentially taken over by another? Unfortunately, I don't know.
So I'm fine with accepting that Hannah is no longer alive, but I don't know if I'm ready to accept that for the beginning of the series, or even throughout the entire series, if she is dead. Because death, while it seems like a very kind of certain thing, is actually a very vague term. She is able to communicate with people, build relationships with new people, being Danny. She's still able to touch people, and this could be due to the fact that she's in denial of her own death, so she still has the ability to touch. But my point is I don't think that that is dead. It's almost like she's stuck in this state of limbo, or this state of purgatory, which, if you recall, is the way that older Jamie describes Viola's situation when she is stuck in the trunk.
What there waited for her at the end of this purgatory.
And maybe it's due to Viola's spell that she's cast on the house. Maybe all the ghosts are stuck in purgatory the entire time, and that state includes being stuck between life and death. Now moving on to Peter and Rebecca. They are a different situation because they have each other and they are blinded by love for whatever reason. It could be due to the fact that Peter has never had a supportive family, as we learn in episode 7. And I think this massively contributes to the reason that Peter goes so far as to kill the love of his life in order to keep her forever. Soon after he dies, he finds out that he is in fact trapped. And of course this comes as kind of a burden and a massive weight on him, but at the same time you can sense this excitement in his eyes as he realises that if Rebecca also dies, the two of them will be trapped there forever. She won't be able to run from him like everyone else in his life has. They'll have no choice but to stay together forever, and they will be closer through death. He also says something quite interesting as he is dream hopping in episode 7.
It's hell. It's like I'm in hell.
Well, where else would you go?
When I watched this, I was kind of shocked because the portrayal that Mike Flanagan is going for here of the afterlife is very similar to the one I had when I was about 9. I believe that when you died, you would constantly be stuck in memories. And if you had been good in your life, those would be happy memories. But if you had been bad, those would be torturous memories. And for him, they are clearly torturous. Whereas, for example, Hannah keeps going back to the scene when she first met Owen and realised that she was in love with him. Or on the flip side of that, it could just be the things that haunt you most about your life. So Hannah regrets not doing anything about Owen, and Peter suffers from the inability to escape his mother's manipulation. Now moving on to the faceless ghosts. So it is known from Hill House that Mike Flanagan enjoys hiding little treats for us in the background of whatever's going on. But the fact that these ghosts don't have faces, as well as the lady in the lake of course, I think this is more than simply time moving on and therefore features of them wearing away. I think all of this is about memory, and this is where the relationship between the living and the dead is crucial. All the ghosts, including the child and the lady of the lake, have been forgotten. Of course, naturally, the longer you're away from someone, the more you forget the specific things about them. And I'm fortunate enough to never have experienced grief myself, but I've heard from those who have that the longer time goes on, the harder it becomes to see the person's face. And this can be a very scary and haunting feeling. You're able to remember the general things about them, whether they were good or bad, but those things usually become blown out of proportion. And if they were good, they are now seen as a hero. And if they were bad, they are now seen as a monster. But all the small details, the things that made them them, including their face, begin to fade away. And maybe this is why Hannah's candles are so important, because as long as they are lit, the people who they represent aren't forgotten. Moving on to Viola, this is a whole other thing. I think Viola's whole story is so much more complex than I am able to get into. Because of course she is the source of the trap that the ghosts are in. She is the reason all of this is happening. And I mentioned in my previous video that actually that death for her is not all that different to her final years of being alive. While she's alive, she's sleeping, she's waking and she's walking. And then when she's dead, she's sleeping, she's waking and she's walking. I really think Viola is a wonderful character, and I think the amount we got to know of her from one episode is kind of phenomenal. She's so stubborn and so strong, and her force is not something that you want to get on the bad side of. She loves hard, but she hates harder. And of course, it's a cliche to say that love and hate are two different sides of the same coin. But that's why her relationship with her sister is so complicated, because of course her sister was the one that murdered her and then betrayed her dying wish. But I think her haunting of the house, it's the same thing, you know, it's the relationship between the living and the dead, but this time it's reversed. People often say, you know, funerals are for the living, and it's all about the living missing the dead, and of course the dead are fine because they're dead. But in this case was shown the living have moved on, whereas Viola is still stuck. She's still stubborn, she's still lonely, and she still feels betrayed. She is the one doing the grieving this time, not the living. So I thought that was a cool interpretation, but also a very sad one, because if that is in fact the case, if ghosts do remember and ghosts are longing to be with the living still, I mean, that is kind of a horrible thought to have. Because the living can move on, they can forget, ghosts can't. That's it, that's the end of their experiences. But that was the fuel that started the fire. It was her love towards her sister and her love for her daughter. And unfortunately that became twisted, and in the end, created a monster. Like I said, I could talk for days, but I wanted to keep this somewhat swift. When comparing Hill House and Bly Manor, I actually found Bly Manor to be a lot scarier than Hill House. Sure, Hill House had more jump scares, things that would, you know, frighten you in the moment, but Bly Manor tackled more realistic issues, things that do in fact haunt us daily. If I were to sum up what I think this series is about, I would say it's about being haunted by yourself. Your own thoughts, your own regrets, your own memories. Because taking away an external force, whether it's a ghost or a zombie or something that can be eradicated, all that you're left with is this internal battle. And I think that's what all the characters are facing in their own way. And that is much harder to get rid of than something scary that's going on outside. You can just, you can find some way to get rid of that. But when it's in yourself, you're stuck, literally trapped in an endless loop. It is a sickness that stays with you, similarly to Dani near the end of the series as Viola consumes her. And so once she enters Dani, she can no longer run away. That really describes the difficulty of internal battles. Bly Manor is a portrayal of grief and longing for someone or something that is no longer there. It depicts the turmoil of what it means to be alive.